balsas yra daug, kaip sakant, tylesnis negu Alvydo, tai jiems tikriausiai reikės truputėlį ausis patekti, nes nebūtinai vakar, nutils. Tai vienas iš vienų būtybių, kur gal reikėsim šiek tiek pasistengti išgirti mane. Na tai, kaip ir jūs visi atėjo šiaip į paskaitą, taip ir aš pradėjau savo, kaip sakant, kelią į praktiką ateidama į paskaitą. Bet tai mano paskaitos, kaip sakant, dėl ko aš ėjau, buvo šiek tiek, gal šiek tiek skirtingas nuo jūsų. Nes tuo metu buvo subongzermeistras, kuris buvo kaip ir korėjietis, pusiau kinietis. Ir mano idėja buvo eiti į paskaitą, tiek klausyti, ką jis sako, bet norėjau labai pasižiūrėti, kaip azijiečiai atrodo. Tai va dėl to būtent ir atėjau į tą paskaitą ir tas mane, kaip sakant, pagavo. Nes jis papasakojo ten, daug ką pasakojo, žinoma, gal kaip ir visi ateina į paskaitas, daug ką išgirsta, paskui pusę pamiršta, ar pusę nesupranta. Bet kai pradeda pasakoti istorijas, tai visi prisimena labai gerai tas istorijas. Na ir mane užkabino tą istoriją, galbūt daugelis iš jūsų žino, net jeigu skaitėte visokiausias zen knygas ar jau kokias istorijas. Tai būtent apie vieną istoriją, kur du vienuoliai keliavo iš vieno vienuolyno į kitą. Ir bekeliaudami, jie buvo susitarę, kad keliauja tyloje, tai ne kaip ir kad nekalba. Ir jie pamažu eina ir praktikuodami iš vieno vienuolyno eidavo namo į kitą savo vienuolyną. Na ir pakeliui, einant prie tokį upelį, o prie upelio stovi labai graži mergina. Ir neapsirengusi, kaip tik ruošiasi, kaip galbūt kažkieno vestuvė, žinau, ten ypač kaip korėjiečiai gal matė tas suknelės tokios didelės ir puošnios. Ir dabar nežino, kaip jie pereiti tą upelį, nes jeigu neįsi tą upelį, sušlaps. Ir šiaip ir taip, ir nei per šokti, niekaip nežino, kaip jie pereiti. Vienuoliai priejo, vienuolis vienas pamatė, jie iš karto pagriebė ant rankų, pernešė per upelį ir pastatė ir toliau eina. Nu ir kitas vienuolis, žinoma, iš paskos, jie būdai grįžta eina atgal ir pamažu taip, jau savo greit leidėsi, jau netoli vienuolyno, o tas kitas vienuolis, kuris nepakėlė tos merginos, kaip sakant, pasigalvoja, prasideda visas mąstymas. O kaip tai galime, taigi vienuolis, taigi negalima liesti moterų, o dar tokia graži moteris, tai kaip jis taip galėjo padaryti? Pradeda pykti Seimą ir pastovi galvoja ir nežinau, vėliau neištvėrė. Tai klausė to vienuolio. Tai kodėl tu pakėlė ir nešiai tą moterį? Tai sako, aš savyje palikau prie upės, o kodėl iki šiol tu nešiai? Tai va būtent tą išgirdus, mane taip sugriebė ir galvojau, kad iš tiesų mes labai daug ką nešamės su savim, nežinia iš kada, iš kur ir kada tai atsitiko, kažkada kažkas pasakė ir vis dar nešiojam tai savo kaip atminčių kuprinėje. Va dėl to iš karto kitą dieną užsirašiau į atsiskyrimą ir, kaip sakant, įklipau, kaip matot iki šiol. Tai tuo kelias ir prasidėjo ir paskui iš Lenkijos į Koreją, Koreją tapau vienuolę, o kadangi mano mokytoja iš Hongkongo, tai ir nuskridau ten į Hongkongą padėti ir kaip tuo metu iki šiol kaip ir pasilikau Hongkonge. Na, iš tokių pačių, iš mano patirties, va kaip ir pasakoju šitą pačią istoriją apie nešiojimą, žinot, kaip pradeda, visi galvoja, kad vienuoliai pradėjo praktikuoti, tai čia jokių, žinai, viskas ramu, labai gražu, jokių problemų, viskas labai malonu. Nu, tiesą pasakęs, mes esame visi tokie patys žmonės kaip ir jūs. Tai galbūt šitą iš mano praktikos viena tokia linksmų istorijų, galbūt labai atitinka kaip tik dabar šitai situacijai, kadangi mes čia turim būgnus mušančių šalia. Tai vat norėčiau papasakoti tą pačią tokią situaciją, kur ir man atsitiko, kai aš buvau Kalnuose viena iš mokyklų ir tik turėjau prieš atsiskyrimą, kaip sakant, dar neprasidėjęs atsiskyrimas, atvažiavau anksčiau pasiruošti, nu ir laukiu kitą dieną jau žmonės, kad turėtų atvažiuoti. Nu, tą visą dieną aš tvarkiau, pasiruošiau visą šventyklą, nu ir dabar einu miegoti, bet kaip tik tuo metu, kaip sakyčiau, kad tai būtų maždaug kaip ir dabar, kažkur birželio mėnesį, ir pas mus yra tos, nežinau kaip lietuviškai, sikados. Tai turbūt, ar ne? Gal kitokią pavadinimą gal turi, nežinau. Tai tuo metu, tais metais buvo kažkoks tai cikadų metas. Tai vienu žodžiu, aš atvažiavau į kalnus, atvažiavau į šventyklą ir toksai triukšmas, gal girdėjot, nežinau, kiek iš jūsų girdėjo cikado garsą. O, va, visi girdėjo. Tai žinot, kaip mašina važiuoja, be sustojimo. Nu ir aš pagalvojau, va, koks garsas, pasakiau porą žodžių, negirdžiu savęs, va, gerai čia. Tai dar kartą pasakiau, va, nieko nesigirdi. Nu tai bent. Nu, o pas mus yra, kadangi ten tokios šventyklėlės mažos, viena netoli kitos ir nešalia, tokie, sakysim, 10 metrų aukščiau, yra kita šventyklėlė, kur vienuolis gyvena. Ir visą laiką jisai išeidamas, jis įjungia tokią mašiną, kuri kaip giedančią mašiną palieka, kad maždaug, kad žinotų, kad ten yra žmogus, kad niekas ten per daug neįtų. Girdisi garsas, tai maždaug ir kam nereikia, ten nelystų. Tai įjungęs į tą mašiną, ir kadangi tas cikadas labai jau taip garsiai, kaip sakant, irgi gieda, tai jis įjungė truputį garsiau ir išėjo. Tai aš girdžiu mašiną groja, reiškia, vienuolio nėra, tai viskas tvarkoja. Ir čia viskas susiruošęs, viskas jau vakaras, einu miegoti ir kaip tik kažkur apie 7-8 valandas cikados kaip išjungta. Tink, tylu. Nu, kaip gerai, tai tiesiog iš viso, kaip mašina, paėmė ir išjungė, jokia garsa. Tik tai ta mašina, kur vienuolis paliko. Ant viso kalno. O aš dar tokia, kuri nemiega, jeigu labai kas nors triukšmauja. Tai galite įsivaizduoti, kas toliau atsitiko. Tada einu, bandau, o kadangi karšta, tai reikia langus vis tiek atsidaryti, nes labai karšta. Tai jau 9, man miegot neišeina, kadangi ta mašina vis groja ir groja. Nu, panašiai kaip čia būgnai būtų, jeigu nieko nesigirdi, nori išgirsti, ką kalba, čia groja. Nu, tai pradeda šiek tiek jau čia virpina truputėlį kažkaip nemalonu. Gerai, nieko negirdžiu, nieko nežinau, einu miegoti. Pagalbiu užsidėti ausų, vis tiek girdis. Nors tu ką, nu gerai, uždarau langus, vis tiek girdžiu. Nu jau iki 12, aš ir taip, ir ten, ir šiaip, ir ten, vis tiek užmigt negaliu. Tik tai ta mašina mane nervuoja, jau jausmai pradeda kilti daugiau ir daugiau ir daugiau. Galiausiai viskas, iki 3 valandų visiškai nemiegojusi, jau ugnis jau ant visos, jau sugalvoju visas, kaip parašyčiau jam laišką, pasakyčiau, ko paklausčiau, kai jam perduoti. Visokiausius planus perdarius, galiausiai nebeištvėriau, galvoju, viskas. Nu gerai, jeigu tu nori pasakyti, kad visi žinotų, kad tu esi čia, tai aš padarysiu taip, kad tu žinotum, kad aš čia. Žinoma, labai kvaila, nes kadangi jo čia nėra, tai jis nežinotų, kad aš čia esu. Nu, tada pasiėmiau, mes pradedam mūsų praktikas. Žinoma, daug gal iš jūsų jau darė tą praktikas, tai žinot, kad pradedam nusilenkimą. Tai galvoju, gal nusilenkimą kiek padės. Greitai, ten vienu žodžiu visus nusilenkimus, 1-2 padaręs, tai vis tiek nieko nepadeda, ugnis dar labiau kyla. Nu, tada prasideda giedojimą. Nu, ir kadangi kiniečių tas varpas yra taip kaip dubenėlis toks ir jį muša iš šono. Nu, ir jeigu tie, kurie praktikuojantys žino, kad mūsų rytinį varpą tą giesmę, tai žinoma, jinai buvo labai pagreitinta ir aš tą varpą, kaip sakant, mušu. Ir tas varpas čia kaip ant žemės, jis kaip kamuolys rieda aplinkui, iš viso, kaip sakant, iš visų jėgų, čia su visų balsu, kaip reikiant, išgiedoju, kad, nes reikia parodyti, kad aš čia esu. Taip, varpą pabaigiam, tada pasiėmė muktaką ir kad mušu, jau taip mušu ir taip jau, kaip sakant, rėkdavau, kiek galėjau. Nes tiek jėgų, žinai, kiek prisigalvojus. Ir galiausiai žiūriu, aš mušu tą muktaką, žiūriu, aš su visom jėgom, galiausiai žiūriu tą muktaką, aš atsiprašau, aš beveik tave greičiai sulaužysiu tuo. Tai kažkaip net nemalonu, atsiprašau, toks jausmas gailesčio tą muktaką, tikrai dar truputėlį ir lūš. Tai taip, toks, atsiprašau, čia ne prie ko, žinoma. Ir tuo metu aš sustojau. Nes pilna pykčio. Visa pilna ugnies, ant to viso vienuolio, viso pasaulio, ko čia dabar toks triukšmas, nieko neišsimiegojus. Ir tuo pačiu metu pilna gailesčio. Tuo pačiam mediniam įrankiai. Ir tiesiog tą pačią akimirką viskas sustoja. Ir kai sustojo, tada tiesiog, tai šitas pyktis, visas tas jausmas, tai nesu aš. Tai yra taip, kokia, kaip pati ir kuri pasirodo, bet tai nesu aš, bet mes visą laiką galvojam tai, kad tu jauti, kad esu aš. Nu ir tada nuo tos akimirkas visi kokie bebuvo, ten pykčiai ir be jokie jausmai, iš karto viskas išnyko, viskas ramu, labai gražu. Ir pilna meilė ir džiaugsmo visam pasauliui. Ir tada viskas labai gražu. Ir istorija baigėsi tuo, kad mes ten dar žemiau yra kita šventykla, kur yra dvi labai senos vienuolės gyvena. Ir jos visą laiką, kai mes turim atsiskyrimus, mums virdavo sriubą. Tai kadangi aš ten taip gerai giedojau, tai kitą rytą iš karto ateina pas mus žmogus ir klausia, kiek pas jūs žmonių, kiek mums čia sriubos reikia išvirti. Žinoma, labai buvo, kaip sakant, gėda, bet viena laimė tai, kad tą dieną žmonės atėjo, kokie 10 žmonių atvažiavo, tai galėjau pasakyti, kad tai 10. Bet visi gali suprasti, ant kiek to galėjau parodyti, kad kiek ten yra žmonių su savo gėdojimu. Bet vieną, ką norėčiau iš to pasakyti, kad būtent ta pati praktika, jeigu aš nebūčiau praktikavęs, pavyzdžiui, ir nebūčiau žinojęs visų tų praktikų, tai gal būčiau tikrai ėjęs paskui tą pyktį. Tai imčiau tą pyktį ir galbūt tikrai parašyčiau kokį laišką, arba iš paskos bėgčiau paskui tą vienuolį, arba dar kažką padaryti. Tai tos galėtų baigtis tikrai nelabai gerai. O kadangi aš tikrai, sakant, visą tą energiją įdėjau į tą praktiką, ne tik, kad nepadariau kažko to negero, bet ir tuo pačiu galėjau patirti dar gilesnį ir pasižiūrėti į save dar giliau. Bet aš to norėčiau visiems palinkėti, kad jeigu jūs turit galimybę praktikuoti, tai nepergyventi, kokius be jausmus beturėtumėte, kas bebūtų, kad visą tai, ką turit, įdėti į praktiką. Ir po to, kai praktikuoji bent jau kurį laiką, be sustojimo, vėlgi į save giliau pasižiūri ir tada gali matyti, kad iš tiesų ta praktika gali padėti ne tik tai tau, bet ir visiems aplinkiniams. Net tokių paprastų dalykų, kad nenueini ir supyksti ant žmonių. O pavyzdžiui, pasidarai mielas ir gali padėti kitiems. Tai vat norėčiau tokią palinkėti, galbūt ir jūs rytoj irgi susigalvosit ir ateisit į paskaitą, ne tik į paskaitą, bet ir į praktiką ir galite patys patirti. O jeigu turit kokių klausimų, tai mes turim čia mokytoją, kuris gali klausti. Tai ačiū visiems.
Naujų žmonių pasirodė, mes čia buvom tarę, kad be vertėjo, nes visi kalba angliškai, gal iš naujų žmonių kažkam reikia vertėjo. Visi supras angliškai.
Jeigu rankas kam vis dėlto jaučiat, kad man reikia vertėjo iš anglų kalbos, ne, mes taupysim laiko tada.
Jo, daug tikrai bus.
Thank you for your talk, Sunim, and your wonderful story. Also, thank you everyone for coming. How many people here have some meditation practice already? How many of you? How many Zen practice? Good. How many of you are going to the retreat this weekend? Wonderful. I want to thank Alvydas for inviting me here to spend a week with you in Lithuania. It's the first time I've been here. Alvydas and I met last October in Korea, and we were able to work out a way for me to come here. I'm really grateful to be here. Also grateful to Myon Hae Sunim for supporting me in coming to Lithuania, and thankful to Myon Hae Sunim, who I met last winter, for taking care of me and arranging my schedule and feeding me. Not so much Lithuanian food, actually, a lot of Chinese food. Usually, I will always ask for questions, and I will in a moment, but I wanted to begin with a story that came up last night in dinner. We had a Dharma talk like this in Kaunas, and after the talk, we went to dinner. Several of us went to dinner, and we were talking about what it's like to practice, what our practice life is like. And I remember this story which I told. It's a story that involves a Tibetan Buddhist teacher named Milarepa. Maybe many of you have heard some story, at least, of Milarepa. I'm not going to describe everything in his life, but he, when he was a young man, he had a lot of anger. and he killed people and created a lot of trouble for many people. And finally he hit, in English we say he hit bottom. He could not live that way anymore. And so he went and found a very high-class Tibetan Buddhist teacher who tried to teach him, but the teacher realized that Milarepa was not ready yet, and he sent him away. Later, Milarepa found someone who could work with him, and at the point of the story, Milarepa has actually done a lot of practice, meditation practice, and he's living up in a cave in the mountains, doing solo practice, very hard, very intense. And one day he has to go outside his cave to get firewood so that he can cook his food. And he gathers the wood and he returns to his cave with an armful of wood. And when he gets to his cave, the entire cave is filled with demons. Understand this word, demons? Yeah. So these are Tibetan demons, really, really, really awful demons with flaming hair and bulging eyes and fangs that are dripping blood and big claws and big bellies, and they smell bad, and they're really quite intense demons. And Milarepa, his first response is his karmic response. He gets angry, and he begins throwing the firewood at the demons in the cave, trying to drive them out of the cave. But they're demons. The wood just goes right through. It doesn't hurt them at all. And so they just sit there. And then he picks up stones and rocks and he's throwing those at the demons. And of course, again, the demons don't move. His anger, his karma, does nothing to get rid of the demons. So then he sits on the ground for a bit and an idea appears for him. He says to himself, I know, I will teach them about Buddhism. That will help them, and then they will go away. So he teaches them about the Four Noble Truths, and the Eightfold Path, and the three poisons, and the 12 marks of 12 steps of dependent origination, and on and on and on like that. And of course, the demons don't pay any attention at all. So this is very interesting, these first two ways that Milarepa tries to get rid of the demons, I think, are very familiar to all of us. All of us have what we might consider demon energy inside of us. These repetitive thought patterns and mind habits that control much of our behavior. And many of us try to get rid of these demons or avoid these demons through maybe alcohol or drugs, or through following our desires, or through anger. Anger actually is very good at distracting yourself from your demons. It pulls you right away from being face to face with demons. So that's what Milarepa did. The second thing he did is try to teach them the Buddha Dharma, which is a Dharma teacher disease. It's very common for people to read some books on Buddhism and think that they know something and think that their knowledge about Buddhism is actually going to help them. But knowledge about Buddhism doesn't help anybody at all. It's good, it's interesting information, but it doesn't change anyone's lives. I sometimes say it's a little like, you decide to learn about the piano, and you can read books on music theory and on the piano. You can listen to recordings of great piano concertos. You can go to concerts. You can actually go into the piano store and look at the pianos. And all of that may be interesting to you. You may even learn how pianos are made. Maybe you even get a job with Steinway making pianos. But none of that has anything to do with making music on a piano. The only way to make music on a piano is to actually learn how to play the piano. And there's no shortcuts to that if you've ever tried to learn an instrument. There's no quick way. So, Milarepa, in trying to teach Buddhism to these demons was employing a standard strategy, which is to draw on his knowledge, not his wisdom, but on his knowledge, to try to solve this particular situation. And of course, it doesn't work. Knowledge actually doesn't help us very much in the difficult moments of our lives. When the demons didn't move the second time, Milarepa was at a loss. He did not know what to do. In the Zen tradition, we would say that he entered into don't know, which is before thinking. That is to say, his thinking stopped. His karma stopped. And then something appeared that was very clear for him. So he said to the demons in the cave, "What do you have to teach me?" And all the demons disappeared, except for one. They all went away, just by asking that question. However, the biggest, ugliest, nastiest of the demons stayed in the cave, did not move. There's different versions of this story, but the version that I first heard, and the version that actually resonates with me the most, that makes the most sense to me. At this point, Milarepa was, again, he did not know what to do. And so he just sat quietly looking at this demon. And then, again, something appeared for him. And he walked into the cave, up to the demon, and put his head right in the demon's mouth. Like that. And that's where the story ends. So we can imagine what might have happened at that moment. Maybe he got enlightenment, but the story doesn't tell us. It's very suggestive, though. At that moment, he completely became one with his demon. The one thing in his life that was most terrifying and which, in a very deep way, controlled his life more than anything else. And he became one with it. He didn't try to get rid of it. It's also suggestive that in order to do this last action with this demon, he actually had to go into his own cave, into his own home, to do this. So perhaps he came to his true home by meeting his demon in this way. This is not easy work. At this point, Milarepa had practiced for a long time. He was a very seasoned practitioner. But he was able to fully embrace his life, just as it was, with its demons and its craziness and with his karma. He did not try to avoid anything in his life. Of course, at first he tried to, but that didn't work. We can't avoid our demons. I heard this story, I read this story in a magazine in the United States about 2.5 years ago. And a couple of months after reading this story, I was driving my car across the United States. It's a big country. It takes, if you're driving really fast and 12 hours a day, it takes almost 6 days to drive across the country. And I was taking much longer because I was going to national parks and I was visiting friends, and so it took me actually over a month to drive across the United States. Much of the United States is pretty empty. There's not much out there. Some of you perhaps have been to the big cities. They're wonderful. But when you get outside the big cities, there's not a lot going on. So you end up staying in small hotels along the roadside. We call them motels. Motor hotels. And there was a particular kind of motor hotel that I like to stay in. So I would always call ahead and make a reservation in the morning for that night, because I knew I would be in a certain place that night. And at this point in the trip, I was in the beautiful state of Utah, where there are many beautiful parks, very interesting deserts and canyons. And I had pulled into the hotel parking lot, and I always parked my car away from the other cars, because at that time my car was new and I didn't want anybody to bump into it. That kind of mind, right? been hiking all day in the canyons and mountains, and I was rearranging my car and kind of packing things up and getting my suitcase together to go inside the hotel. And I could hear way at the other end of the parking lot, at the entrance to the parking lot, I could hear this rumbling sound. And I knew immediately it was motorcycles. I looked down the parking lot, and there were 4 men in motorcycles coming in. These big kinds of motorcycles, and they had long, black, greasy hair and black leather jackets with these, emblems and skulls and lightning and things on them. And they came all the way down the parking lot, and they pulled in right next to me. There were many empty places, but they pulled in right next to me. And I watched myself, I've been practicing a long time, and I watched my mind shut down. I put my head inside the car, and I got really busy with my stuff. I didn't want anything to do with these guys. And I hear one of them say to me, "Oh, you're from Washington State." He had seen the license plate on the back of my car. And I popped my head out of the car, and I said, yes, I am. And he said, "We're from Washington State, too." Oh, that was kind of interesting, He's starting a conversation with me. So, I kind of rearranged my mind as best I could to have a conversation with this man. And I said, "Where are you from?" And he said, "Oh, we're from Marysville. Where are you from?" "Oh, I'm from Seattle." And these are about 20 miles apart, about 30, 35 kilometers apart. Not far. And so we started talking a little bit, and they've been traveling very hard on their motorcycles. It's a hard way to travel at high speeds for all day. They were tired, and I said, "Where are you going?" And they said, "Oh, we're going to Arkansas," which is a state in the United States. And I said, "Oh, I was just in Arkansas a few weeks ago." And I said, "Why are you going to Arkansas?" And he said, "Oh, we're going to visit family." And I said, "Oh, that's fine. I was there too. I was also visiting family." And then I said, "Where are you going?" And he named this town way up in the northern part of the state. And it was about 10 miles from the town that I had visited. His family grew up, there was one of the 4 men was the father of these 3 sons. And they had grown up, he had grown up about 10 miles from my father in Arkansas. So it's very interesting. I made these men into demons when they came into the parking lot. Because I have some idea about people wearing black leather on motorcycles, right? And I got to actually meet some really wonderful people. We had a very nice conversation staying in the parking lot. This is how mind functions. We create demons. These demons aren't separate from us. We make them. And if we don't confront them directly, if we don't enter into a conversation with our demons, they will control us. That's the meaning of the Miller of the story. Meet your demons. Find out about yourself in that way. I got to find out something about myself in this hotel parking lot. And it was a wonderful experience. It brought the story of Milarepa to life in my own consciousness, in my own life. I think one of the benefits of practice, Milarepa found this, I also found this, is that it gives us enough stability in our center that we can turn directly into things that we don't like, things that are uncomfortable or difficult for us. We don't have to run away from our lives. So I'm grateful to everyone who practices and everyone who's interested in practice, because I have found meditation practice to be a very powerful way for staying present with everything that life presents, the good things and the bad things, the things that we like and the things that we don't like. It's very important to do that because if you don't, suffering is guaranteed. So with that little story, it came up last night and I thought I'd talk about it today. I want to see if you have any questions. You can ask questions about practice or about Zen, about Buddhism, or about daily life. Any kind of question is okay. Please.
I want to ask about the relationship with a teacher. What is the role of the relationship with a teacher in this particular Zen tradition?
In Buddhism, many of you know that in Buddhism there are many different kinds of Buddhism. You know, there's Tibetan Buddhism, and there's Zen Buddhism, and there's Pure Land Buddhism, and Vipassana, and on and on. Buddhism is as diverse as Christianity is. So there's not just one kind of Buddhism. In some traditions, particularly in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, students are encouraged to form very close relationships with their teachers. They call it Guru Yoga, where the teacher is viewed as the embodiment of Buddha nature, and that very close relationship in Tibetan Buddhism is able to help the student develop in a very rich and profound way. But that's just one way, and it's not the Zen way. The Zen way, and particularly in our school, and I practice in the Kwan School of Zen, which is, let me just say a few words about that for those of you who don't know. The Kwan School of Zen is an international organization. It was founded by a Korean Zen master in the late 1970s, Zen Master Sun. We have over 100 centers in more than 30 countries around the world. And we have teachers like myself who travel around a lot from center to center. Zen Master Sun, our founding teacher, he died 10 years ago. He was a very interesting man. He had a lot of travel karma. Even though he grew up in South Korea in the years after World War II and became a Buddhist monk and a Buddhist teacher, not long after that he went to Japan to teach Korean people in Japan. And then in the early 1970s in Korea, he was reading an article, a newspaper or magazine article about hippies in North America. And he thought, oh, hippies, they sound interesting. I could probably teach these kinds of people. Not so tight. It's actually not true, but that was, that's how it seemed to him. And so he moved to the United States in 1972. He did not speak any English at that time. But he had some mechanical skills, so he got a job repairing washing machines in a laundry place in the United States. And students at the local university saw him. He was clearly, we see Sunim and it's not an ordinary person. So they started hanging out with him, and they couldn't talk with him, but he made really good soup and he laughed a lot. And that was enough, for people to stick around. But again, he had traveling karma. So in 1978, he came to Poland during the communist period in Poland. I don't know how he got into Poland in 1978. It's baffling to me. I really don't understand. But I was in Poland last year. The first place he went in Krakow, and they have photographs of him stepping off the train into the train station in Krakow. And he kept coming to Poland, and he came to Lithuania at one point, and other places in Europe, particularly in Eastern Europe. Really quite amazing that he would do that. He went to, started going into China very early. As soon as China started opening up in the 1980s and 90s, he started going to China, trying to bring Zen Buddhism back into China, where it started, but no longer existed. He passed on a legacy to his Dharma heirs of traveling and teaching. So our school is arranged where every Zen center has a guiding teacher, but different teachers come and go at every Zen center. And that was an intentional decision that Zen Master Sun made. Not just one teacher forever with one student, but many teachers with students. Partly because he did not want this guru kind of relationship that in some traditions is the norm, is the standard. He wanted students to work with many different teachers so that they could experience many different ways of expressing the Dharma. The Dharma is the same. The Dharma never changes. The Buddha Dharma never changes. But the expression of it changes based on each person's life experience and how they express that experience. And in the Zen tradition, we use kongans, these short stories that have sometimes confusing questions associated with them. Although every teacher is their own person and expresses the Dharma in their own way, we generally agree that there's a certain range of answers that are acceptable for these kongans. And that makes it possible with an international school for teachers to travel around and work with many different kinds of students in many different countries. So for example, I'm in Europe now for 3 months, traveling from every weekend. I'm in a different country or a different city, leading a retreat for 3 months. I started in Spain and I worked my way north, and on Monday I go to Vienna, and then I'll go to the Czech Republic, and then I'll go to Hungary, and back to the Czech Republic, and something like that. So that's very common in our school, these teachers traveling around. And in my view, and also in my experience in the many years that I was a practitioner, a student, there's a great deal of richness in that. We get to experience many different kinds of people. Some teachers are very kind of strong and stern, like this. Other teachers are like that. Many different styles. But it's just clothing. All that is just clothing. It's not the Buddha Dharma. So it's wonderful for people to experience that, I think. It helps us understand. What it helped me understand when I was a student was that I don't have to be like a teacher. I don't have to dress like they dress. I don't have to speak like they speak. I don't have to eat the food that they eat. I can be my own person. I can be who I actually am. I don't have to imitate somebody else. And it's very common for students in some traditions to begin imitating their teacher. They will speak with, if their teacher is from a different country, they will speak with the same accent as their teacher. They'll use their teacher's pet phrases, cute ways of expressing things. If the teacher doesn't like going to movies, then they won't go to movies. None of that has anything to do with Buddha Dharma. So actually, working with many different teachers, I believe, helps students, helps practitioners find out who they actually are as people. It's very important. So that's how we work with it. Do you have another question about that?
Yes. So, in these traditions which are based on devotion, you have to trust your teacher fully.
You do.
And you choose the teacher who you really trust.
That's right.
And here, as I understand, you have to trust your practice completely, yes?
That's right. That's right. I couldn't say it better. Our way in our Zen tradition is to fully trust yourself. And part of my job as a teacher is to push people a little bit, to poke them a little bit, to see if they trust themselves. All of us at some point do not trust ourselves. So it's not like someday, oh, now I trust myself, now I've done that work, I'm finished. It's not like that. But working with another person allows us to see where our boundary is. Hopefully a teacher has the skill and the insight to push a student right up to their boundary and let the student experience that. As a traveling teacher, I travel most of the year. As a traveling teacher, I often don't have rich enough relationships with students to do that. That's where having a guiding teacher is important. A guiding teacher meets the same students year after year after year and begins to understand their karma more fully and can help that student explore their lives in a richer way than a visiting teacher ever can do. But as you say, for students or practitioners to truly trust their own experience, their own lives. That's all we have. You know, I've read lots of books on Buddhism and lots of sutras, but I trust my own experience. That's most important. So teachers help with that process. In one of the importance in text, there's a kind of commentary on a story. This commentary says, teacher, I am pecking out. Please, you peck in. Pecking is what chickens do, you know. So the meaning is, I'm inside my shell, pecking out. Teacher, please help me peck in from the outside to break this shell. So it's something we do together. Students and teachers do it together. Actually, teachers are also picking out. And the student pecks in for the teacher. I said to Sunim today, we were talking earlier in the day, and I said, in some ways, my training did not start until I became a teacher. That's when my training really started. So don't think that teachers have something really special. They don't. I can guarantee you. They're human beings. And they are committed to training. They're committed to helping other people. But the job of learning about our lives never ends. We're never completed. We can never say, got it, done, finished. Let's go to the movies. And it doesn't work that way. I wish it did. It'd be really cool. But it doesn't work that way. So teachers and students help each other. In our tradition, that's the model. Another question?
Well, I don't want to ask a stupid question right now, but I had a conversation with my teacher in university about Buddhism, and he said one phrase, and it just stuck into my head, and I was just thinking about it a lot after. He said that we were talking about culture, like in different countries, and what people believe in and everything, and he said that people who don't understand, like Western people, like Lithuanians, for example, or Americans, people who don't understand Christianity, or like the other ways of believing, their traditional belief, those who don't understand it, they turn to other religions, like Buddhism and stuff like that. And I was wondering, what do you think of that? If I express myself clearly.
Each of us have, I don't know, so let's see if I understand. Each of us has to find our own way. What works for our own life. And there are many different ways. If you travel around the world, if you go to Japan, for example, you will eat your food with chopsticks. If you go not far away to Korea, you will use chopsticks, but a different kind of chopstick. And you'll also use a spoon. If from Korea you go south to India, you will use your hands. If then you go from India to France, you will use many knives and forks and spoons depending on the meal. If you go to America and have a hamburger, you'll just use a piece of paper and put it in your mouth. There are many different ways to eat. And actually, how you eat isn't very interesting or important. What's important is you get food in your stomach. That's the important thing. And there is one more step. What's important is what you do with the energy that you get from the food. How do you live your life? That is important. So there are many different spiritual traditions. And some people really connect with Catholicism. Some people really connect with Judaism. Some people find that Zen Buddhism is really deep and powerful for them. Some people are Methodists or Lutherans. Some people are pagans. Some people follow New Age tradition of some kind. Some people really like LSD. Some people like drumming. There are many different ways to experience and explore a spiritual path. Most of these traditions have somewhere in them some element of practice. So in the Catholic tradition and the Jewish tradition, for example, buried fairly deeply inside those traditions is actual practice. They call it prayer. We call it practice, but it's the same thing. In the Catholic tradition, actually, they call it contemplative prayer, which is an encounter with God that is before name and form, before thought and speech. In the Zen tradition, we call that same encounter don't know, which is also before speech, before thought, before name and form. Just different names for the same experience. People often adopt a spiritual practice for reasons of resistance. My parents were Catholics, so I'm going to be Buddhist. Like that. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that at all, actually. And in fact, people come to Buddhism for all kinds of reasons. They begin practicing Buddhism for any number of reasons. If they continue practicing Buddhism, year after year after year after year, Buddhism will grind those reasons into dust. Nothing will be left of those original reasons. Because in every reason like that, every original intent is, I want. I want a better life. I want to get rid of my suffering. I want enlightenment. I want to be a teacher. Whatever it is. There's some I want that brings people to practice. That's wonderful. How could it be any other way? But then if people practice steadily over the years, this wonderful thing, another wonderful thing happens, which is practice completely grinds down, gets rid of this I want. I want is actually the source of our suffering. So when we have a strong I want, or even weak I want, that's where our suffering comes from. So it's suffering that brings people to Buddhism, interestingly enough. It's suffering that causes people to continue practicing. And then, maybe 10 years, or 15 years, or 20 years, or 25 years into practice, that original I want is gone. And then people just practice. So at some point, all of us were young at some point, or younger at some point, and somebody told us it's a really good idea to brush your teeth, because if you don't brush your teeth, your teeth are going to crumble and rot in your mouth. And so probably all of us, or most of us, brush our teeth at least once a day, if not twice a day, or even more. And we take care of our teeth. But if you think back to this morning when you were brushing your teeth, you probably weren't thinking about why you were brushing your teeth. Oh, I need to do this because my teeth will rot if I don't do this. Probably that idea did not enter into your mind. You just brushed your teeth like that. That's what happens with people after they practice meditation for 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. That idea, which is a very good idea, the idea goes away and they just practice. That's not true only in Buddhism, it's true in Catholic tradition as well. If somebody does contemplative prayer, and it's true in Native American traditions, it's true in every serious practice tradition. Not all spiritual traditions involve practice. And some involve devotion, or projecting onto our hopes and dreams and fantasies on something outside of ourselves. I don't have a lot of personal experience experience with that. I grew up in that kind of tradition, but it never interested me when I was growing up. And as soon as I left home, I stopped going to church because it didn't have any meaning to me. But there are people for whom that has significant meaning, and I don't mean to diminish it or belittle it in any way. What I have found most helpful in my own life is actually having a formal practice of some kind, meditation practice of some kind.
And didn't you feel any relationship with the Master Sun?
I didn't know him well. I was not one of the early students. I had one retreat with him, and in the middle 1990s, 1995, 1996, 1997, 1998, I went to Korea a lot for long retreats, and every morning he would come and give a talk and he would answer questions. I always had a question because it was the only way I was ever going to get any teaching from him. And then I saw him at formal ceremonies and that kind of thing. So I did not have a close relationship with him. My view of him is that he was a difficult person. He was funny and charming, and he had more energy than all of us in this room put together. I don't know how he managed to live. His body was very sick most of his life, but he had an enormous amount of energy. And he was difficult for people. So we hear many stories about how wonderful he was. That's because the people who stayed believed that he was wonderful. Many people left who didn't find him so easy to get along with. But he was the real, in English we say, in America we say the real McCoy. He was the real thing. He was completely himself. He did not try to pretend to be a Zen master, or pretend to be a guru, or pretend to be anything. He just was himself. And when you meet somebody like that, it's pretty incredible. He had type 1 diabetes, juvenile diabetes, all of his life. And it's a devastating illness if you know anything about it. It weakens the heart. People lose sensation in their legs and their feet. They cannot feel in their feet. Their eyesight becomes very bad, and they have many other kinds of problems. And he had that kind of diabetes, and yet he traveled constantly and taught constantly. And there are many stories that I've heard over the years about somebody coming to his door at midnight and knocking on his door. They have to talk to them because they have some crisis in their life. So they have to talk to the Zen master, and they knock on their door. He opens the door, and he sits and talks with them for an hour, and off they go. Like that, you know, he was really committed to helping people. And even though his body was very sick, he never stopped helping people. As far as I know, nobody ever told me, none of the people who were close to him said that he burned out. He never burned out because he had this strong vow to help this world. It was not about him. Somebody once asked him, they said, "Sir, what is the fast way to enlightenment?" And he said, "Not for me," which means let go of I, mine, me. Let go of I, mine, me, and life happens just like that. So he was not hindered by I, mine, me, which meant that he never burned out. He was never concerned about his body. He took care of his body as best he could. He had many, many medical treatments, particularly in the last 20 or 30 years of his life, because he wanted to continue doing his job to help people. He didn't want to die until there was no choice. And there are, of course, still many suffering people in this world. There's a story I've heard, I can't remember the story accurately, but maybe Sunim, you know the story, you can correct me. He was just, 11 years ago, he was just a few days away from his death. And a Zen master in Hong Kong Zen Master Day Kwan, came to visit him. And she said, "Sir, please don't die. I will give you a lot of money if you don't die." And he kind of perked up and he said, "Oh, how much money?" And she said, "Well, I will sell the Hong Kong Zen Center and give you all that money if you don't die." Hong Kong Zen Center, I think, is probably a pretty expensive property, worth a lot of money. So she said, "I will give you all this money if you don't die." He said, "Oh, that's a good idea. I take all that money and go to hell and build Zen centers." He always talked about going to hell because there are many suffering people in hell. No reason to go to heaven. Nobody's suffering in heaven. But in hell, a lot of people are suffering. So he was looking forward to that. And I'm sure he's got a huge Zen center. Without the Hong Kong money. So that was his mind, only help this world. And he practiced very hard, right to his death, in order to do that. When I saw him in the 1990s, his body was already very sick, and the Zen Center room, the Zen hall, was on the 3rd floor of this big building, many stairs. There was no elevator. And so every day he would come and give a talk, and you could hear him very slowly coming up the stairs with the 2 monks who were his attendants and watching over him. And he would come in, and finally he would come into the Zen hall, and he would come to his cushion in the middle, and he would do 3 prostrations. 2 with the 3, down on his hands and knees like this. 3 prostrations. He really couldn't do them completely at this point, when I last saw him. So his Dharma heirs were helping him go down and helping him come up. But he never stopped doing his prostrations. And last year I saw a video taken of him giving a talk just a few days before he died, his last public talk. And his body was very sick. He looked awful, almost unrecognizable. But his mind was very clear. And I remember this one section of this video that I saw. One of the people there asked some kind of tricky question that had this strong "I want" in this question. This person wanted some kind of authorization. And Zen Master Sunim just verbally hit him very hard, hit his mind very hard. He was still very clear and really committed to helping everybody right up to the very end. It's very unusual to meet a person like that. That's why people loved him so much, because he's one of those rare people in this world who give their lives completely to helping other people with no thought of themselves. They only consider themselves in order to keep doing their job. Not common. Not common. Is there another question? Yes.
Is it hard to be a Zen master? I mean, do you have a lot of work, a lot of emails, get tired?
I have a body, so my body gets tired, yes. The last 2 days we've been seeing various beautiful and interesting places in Lithuania, and I'd love to do that. I just love to see new things and beautiful places. And today we stayed at home and I rested a lot. I took a long nap, and I do have a lot of email which I needed to catch up on. I have over the years people will write me from all over the world, and many people I've never met with some kind of question about their lives or how to practice, or some problem that they have that they want some guidance on. And I always try to respond quickly to those emails. Also, in our school, in our organization, all of the teachers are on the board of trustees overseeing the organization, so I have work to do in that way as well. started practice in our school, I practiced in another tradition, but when I started practicing in our school 25 years ago, I thought, oh, it would be really great to be a JDPSN. I want that job. That was one of my many ideas that I had. And fortunately, in my practice, sometime around year 17 or 18, I let go of that idea. And that was really important for me. As I continued practicing, I began to let go of almost every idea I had about practice and just practice. And then when it was suggested to me that I should become a teacher, I was no longer interested in that. I said no, actually. No, thank you. And they asked me again, and I said no, thank you. And they asked again, and I said no, thank you. And then they said, well, think about it a little bit, which I didn't really want to do, but it's very interesting to me anyway. I called a very close friend of mine who practices in a different Buddhist tradition, and I said, you know, Jeff, they want me to be a teacher. I don't understand how that could possibly, why me? And Jeff asked this interesting question. He said, why do they want you to be a teacher? And it was like flipping a switch inside. The question, there was no answer that appeared immediately, but right away I perceived something, that this request that was being made was not about me. It was about you. It was about people who need help. And somebody, rather foolishly, had some faith that I might be able to help people. And so, once that question was asked of me, why, then I could see a way that I could do this job. I try to do this job as best as I can. Every teacher makes mistakes. Every teacher falls short. And that's why I said a little while ago that that in some ways my real training has begun since I became a teacher. And it continues. So there are different aspects of teaching, but the most important aspect of teaching is staying present with the person that's right in front of you, not turning away. Milarepa could have turned away from his cave and found another cave. He could have done that. Eventually the demons would show up, of course, but he didn't have to confront his demons. Sometimes as a teacher, I will sit in front of a person that I find delightful and joyful. Sometimes I will sit in front of a person with whom I have no connection at all. And then sometimes there are people who come that really don't like me. And I also have to stay present with that. So it's an incredible opportunity that teachers have to grow as human beings and do their best to try to help the person in front of them. So we peck in and peck out together. And it's so precious. My dear friend Tim Lurch, JDPSN, said to me as I became a teacher, he said, don't want anything from this job. Don't want students to like you. Don't want to like your students. Don't want to help people. Don't want anything from this job. It's very good advice actually for all of us. Don't want anything. Because if you want something, you will be disappointed. Guaranteed. You know what it's like. You think, oh, boy, if I had this new job, my life would be great. And then you get the new job. And it is great for 6 months. And then it's just another job, with other human beings that you have to deal with. And they have their issues, including some issues with you. So that's how it is. Or you meet the perfect partner. Oh, this is the best woman in the world. And it's true for 6 weeks or so. that's okay. And it will make you happy for 10 days, more or less. And then it's just another phone. If you believe that your life will not be complete without the new iPhone, then you've got a problem. Because if you don't have much money, maybe you'll steal some money to buy the new iPhone, then you go to jail. Or if when the iPhone becomes just another phone after 10 days or so, you're going to start chasing after something else again that you think will make you happy. And it doesn't work that way. We don't find happiness in that way. I kind of wandered away from your question. Yes?
Do you have children, and if you do, how would you suggest educating small children involving some kind of Zen tradition?
I have an adult child. I have a daughter who's 28 years old, with whom I'm very close. We have a very close relationship. She grew up, I was a single parent for much of her life when she was growing up. She lived with me, and of course I practiced every day at home. And at a certain point in her life, she would hear me chanting in the morning, doing the singing that we do in the morning. And she would come into the room where I practiced, kind of sleepy, in the morning, and lean up against me and go back to sleep. It was very cute. It was like having a pet cat. And then I would take her to ceremonies at the Zen Center, and we always had some special activity for children. And we sometimes do keto retreats, a chanting retreat, where we chant Kwan symbols on the name of the Bodhisattva of compassion. We chant that over and over and over again, and everyone has some kind of percussion instrument to play. When I would take her to these keto retreats, she really liked them for a while, because she had a small wooden drum that she played, and you can come and go. So she would come and chant with us for 10 or 15 or 20 minutes, then she would wander off and read a book or go outside and play or whatever, and then she would come back in and chant some more. Really seemed to work for her. But now she does not practice at all. And occasionally I poke her a little bit and say, don't you think this would help you? And she says, oh yes, it would probably help me. But she doesn't go beyond that. I have a lot of faith that some seed got planted in her, and that when the conditions are right in her life, that seed will sprout and she will begin practicing. The sad part of that, about that, is that the conditions for her to begin practicing means that her life falls apart. Which it does for most of us at some point. So, at some point her life will fall apart, really big time, it will fall apart. And maybe she will begin practicing at that point. I never pushed my daughter to practice. I made it open for her if she was interested in practice. But I never encouraged her to do meditation practice. I've had this interesting experience on this trip in Europe, just the last couple of months. I've been here for 2 months now. In the Czech Republic, we did a retreat in the Czech Republic in the mountains, and a 15-year-old girl came and sat all of the retreat for 3 days. I did a 3-day retreat in St. Petersburg a month ago, and there was a 10-year-old boy who sat the retreat, and there was a 16-year-old boy who was the Moktak master. He led the singing, the chanting. Last year when he was 15, he also did that same job. He's been practicing since he was 8 years old. The 2 young people in Russia are people whose parents practice and who strongly encourage their children to practice. The 15-year-old girl in the Czech Republic, her parents don't care one way or the other. This is her idea. And she's very committed to practice. So in America, I almost never see this. It's very interesting. I never see children at retreats. You'll see them in ceremonies, or parents will bring them to ceremonies. But I don't see them at retreats. And it's been I don't understand how these people are showing up in Europe. I'm just trying to understand it. I don't have a clear idea about it. 16-year-old boy in Russia wants to become a monk as soon as he turns 18. I mean, his path is very clear. In America, this interesting thing is happening at some of our Zen centers and also at other Buddhist centers. We're starting to develop family programs and children's programs. Usually once a month, there'll be, there's like usually Sunday morning practice for the adults, and then there's a separate children's program with different kinds of arts and singing and activities of various kinds. And I've seen those programs, and the kids really seem to have a good time with them. And there's a little bit of Buddhist instruction that comes along with it, which hopefully will be helpful to these people, these young people. The other thing that's interesting in America, and I don't know if this is happening in Europe, is that mindfulness meditation, which is actually related to Buddhism, but is not exactly Buddhism, maybe you've heard of this. Mindfulness meditation is starting to be taught in the public schools in America. It's usually being taught in the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th grade, which is incredible. So, if this continues, I think it will have a dramatic impact on people's lives. Hopefully it will start happening in Europe as well. A little while ago I talked about this driving around the United States and meeting these motorcycle people who were going to Arkansas, the state that I visited earlier. When I travel like that, I always in the morning I stop in at a local coffee shop and have a cup of coffee, and I'm always listening to the conversations. I'm usually by myself, so I'm listening to conversations around me. And in the southern part of the United States, where the state of Arkansas is located, the surrounding conversations are always about Jesus. It's a very religious part of the United States. So I always hear people talking about Jesus. I was in Arkansas on this trip, and I stopped in a coffee shop one morning, and I was listening to the conversation next to me. There were 3 middle-aged women sitting there. And one of them was saying to her 2 friends with this southern accent, she said, "When I got my mindfulness going, things are just easier for me." I was astonished. Because mindfulness it's really just Buddhism without the robes and the forms. So, we're swimming right now. Those of us who practice Buddhism or are interested in Buddhism, we're swimming in water that is changing all around us. Buddhism has come to the West, and it's changing very quickly. And because all of us who practice are in the middle of the water, we're in the water of that change, it's very hard to see the change clearly. We're in it, so we don't have a perspective on it. We can't see it from the outside. So it's very common for Buddhist teachers to talk about the ego, for example, which has nothing to do with Buddhism, but it's a useful pointing term. Mindfulness came directly from Buddhism, but all the Buddhist language and clothing and imagery has all been taken away. The person who actually developed mindfulness in the United States, a man named John Kabat-Zinn, was a student of Zen Master Sung Song for many years. He was also a physician, and he had this idea, this would help people, but most people will never do this. It's too exotic. It's too foreign. They wear these goofy robes. They have to do these chants. There's a big gold Buddha on the altar. Most people are not going to do this. There's got to be a better way. So he developed mindfulness training, and he started using it in a hospital in Massachusetts with people who are very sick or have a lot of pain after surgery. And people started recovering, having a much better recovery. So that was kind of interesting. And so he actually started developing a body of research about the effects of this mindfulness meditation. And in the last 5 years in the United States, mindfulness has just exploded. It's being taught in the military, it's being taught in corporations, it's being taught in schools, it's being taught to police officers. It's being taught everywhere. And it's actually just Buddhism. It's just Buddhist practice, but with all the capital B Buddhism taken out. So that's how Buddhism is coming to the West. So when we think about our own practice as adults, our children may never do our practice, if we have children. They may never do this kind of formal practice that we do. But many of our children and their children will encounter Buddhism perhaps in a very different form. And it will help their lives enormously, I hope. That's my hope. We have this saying in America, thinking about children and parenting. I don't know if you have something similar in Lithuania or anywhere in Europe, but we say in America, the best thing a parent can do for their child is to love their partner. The best thing a husband can do for their child is to love his wife. The best thing a wife can do for her child is to love her husband. As a parent, I know how easy it is for us to become completely absorbed in our child and forget about this wonderful human being that helped create this child who's right next to us. Many couples lose sight of their marriage because child raising is a very demanding activity. Any of you who are parents know that. Maybe some of us who have been children remember the difficulties that our parents might have had. So it's very important that we love each other. Very important. Another question? If we have time for one more question.
May I ask?
Of course.
It's again about demons. My question is, still if you encounter some strong demon, like, I don't know, it could be anger, like Sunim told the story about strong anger, or fear, or some desire. The story tells to put the head into the mouth of the demon. But maybe two questions: what does it mean to put the head into the mouth of the demon? And maybe is it okay to do some very strong practice? Like I heard suggestions to do many bows, like thousands of bows, or a lot of chanting, or any other practice. So what is better? Is it to still try to do some practice and somehow to deal with this karma, with this demon, or just put the head into the mouth and like let it go, let it be as it is? What would you suggest here?
So the first question is, how do we put our head into the mouth of our demon? I love you, Alvitas. Second question. Are there some special practices or techniques that will help? I always encourage people to practice every day, which is actually, for most of us, very hard. It's actually a special practice, practicing every day, with consistency every day of the year. So people sometimes have some idea about what daily practice means. It means, well, I have to do a lot of prostrations and a lot of chanting, and I have to sit for 30 minutes or an hour like that. And, so maybe it takes an hour or 2 hours even to do that kind of practice. 99.9% of people will not do that kind of practice on a daily basis. They are much more interested in their text messages than that. So I encourage do 9 prostrations. That takes 1 minute. And if you do not have 1 minute in your day, then Buddhism is not for you. It's very simple. If you do 1 minute practice every day for 25 years, it will help you enormously. Because that very small effort changes the course of your life. Maybe 1%, it changes the direction of your life. At the beginning, it's such a small change that we don't even know anything is different. We seem just like we've always seemed, kind of crazy and foolish and confused and full of all these passions. And after 5 years, if you only change course 1 degree, it doesn't seem like much. But after 15 or 20 years, that 1 degree change of course means you're in a very different place. It just takes a minute a day to do that. But you have to do it every day. There's always a catch, right? So, do it every day. If you have 5 minutes, then there's more you can do. If you have 15 minutes, there's more that you can do. But there's no excuse for not doing a minute a day. Well, there are, but if you really want to change your life, you can do a minute a day. If you really want to help this world, if you're serious about that, do a minute a day. I have a friend who is a psychologist in Canada. She also teaches mindfulness, and on her office wall is this sign. So all of her clients can read this sign. It says, "Nothing changes if nothing changes." If you're not willing to change how you live 1 minute every day, then nothing's going to change. You're still going to be kind of a miserable person that you are. Sorry. But 1 minute a day makes a great difference. If you can do 15 minutes a day, that's better. If you can go on retreats every time there's a retreat, that's fabulous. If you can go sit a long retreat for a week every year, that's even better. And sometimes people arrange their lives so that every now and then they can sit for 2 weeks or a month or even 3 months. And that really helps people. We also have, as part of our teaching tradition from Zen Master Sun San, this idea that there are special practices that people can do. Maybe some extra prostrations, bowing, or some kind of extra chanting that they can do, or some other kinds of special practices. My experience with that is that it's very dangerous practice. I have a longtime friend. He was a monk at our school for many years. Right now he's in the middle of a 3-year solo retreat under the guidance of a Tibetan Buddhist teacher. 3 years by himself in a cabin in California. He's very serious. But about 15 years ago, this idea appeared. I want a wife. I need to have a wife. And he had in mind a certain kind of wife. She would be tall, she would be blonde, and she would be beautiful, and she would practice Buddhism. So he started doing some special practice. For 100 days, he did this special chanting practice. And a few months later, she showed up. And they got married. And it was a nightmare. They divorced 2 years later. If we do special practice because we have I want, then the special practice will be we'll get something. No doubt about it, we'll get something. These practices are special because they have a result. But if we're doing it with I want, it will not work out well for us. If we do special practice to help this world, then it's no problem. For intention is clear. So personally, I don't teach special practices, with very few exceptions. And keep that in mind, how can I help you from moment to moment to moment, all day, every day of your life, then your life will matter. Your life will make a difference in this world. And you will find happiness, and you'll find contentment and satisfaction. As I said earlier, not for me, but how can I help you? That's the essence of our practice tradition. It's not that you won't have difficulties, you will. All human beings have difficulties. All human beings have days where they would just rather stay in bed. Everyone gets angry from time to time. We all get confused. That's what it means to be a human being. But we don't have to let those mental experiences control us. It's possible to keep this mind that asks, how can I help you, even when you're in a bad mood? Even when you would rather close your bedroom door and just go to bed for a while. It's possible to have that mind. That's the nature of liberation. You are not controlled by your mind. It's not that your mind changes into some magical thing. It just means that it no longer controls you. Every day at the Zen Center we chant the Heart Sutra. In the Heart Sutra, I don't know how it reads in Lithuania, but in the Heart Sutra in English, it says, the mind is no hindrance. Without any hindrance, no fears exist. The mind is no hindrance. Of course, we don't know that. We don't have much experience of that. Our mind seems to hinder us all the time, but it doesn't have to. That's actually optional. That's up to us. We can do something about that. And that's how we practice. That's actually the great gift of our practice, as we begin to see our mind clearly, and when we see it clearly, then it does not control us anymore. We still may have all kinds of crazy thoughts and feelings and impulses and sensations and ideas appear, but they don't control us. It's possible to liberate ourselves from mind. So it's very important we practice. Oh, no,
As you said about this danger of doing a practice with a purpose, a thought came to my mind. I have many friends, and I am also tempted to do this kind of visualization or dreaming practices, like when you dream about something, you focus the thought on some object, like, for example, maybe not husband or wife, but just idea, what job can I make? Many people said to me that if you do that sincerely, it really helps, and it is like the easy way to go in the stream of life. Just kind of focus my mind and ask God for help to get me a job or to get me money. And I was always just in this kind of don't know mood, how can I ask God money? It's like, so I want to ask about this thing. Is this really like a useful tool, or is it a dangerous tool if it is done sincerely?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question. Could you maybe restate it a little bit?
For example, if I want money, I can just focus my thoughts and repeat some, maybe not repeat, but there are plenty of cool practices how to get money.
Sure.
By focusing your mind. So I can just ask God, please give me money for some purpose. And sometimes I feel like I really would like to do that. But I am not sure if it is the wrong way to do that practice, or it's actually the other side of this thinking is, why do I find problematic to just to ask God money and to get that? Because I see people around me getting really these things just by wishing, by thinking, by dreaming, by doing some practices, and by asking sincerely these things.
So my question for you is,
Yeah.
why do you want money?
Just to have a clear life where I can really focus on practice.
The question, why do you want money, is a place where you can put your practice energy. There's a teacher in our school, some of you, he died a few years ago, some of you knew him, Mr. Kwan. I'm sure he came to Lithuania. He's a wonderful teacher. I met him first about 25 years ago when he came to my city in the United States for a retreat. And at that time, he was working as a real estate developer. So I don't know how it is in Europe exactly, but in America at that time, being a real estate developer was kind of a low-class job. You could make a lot of money, but there was a lot of, we could say, wheeling and dealing going on. A lot of difficult and maybe questionable transactions in that industry at that time. And so I asked him over dinner after the retreat, I was kind of direct with him. I said, how do you justify doing that kind of job with being a Zen teacher? I mean, it's not really a correct job, right? And yet you're a Zen teacher. How do you do that? You make a lot of money doing this job. And he said, oh, the job isn't so important. It's what I do with the money that is important. I use this money to build Zen centers. And that was very important. I was a very young student, new student in our tradition at that time. The money wasn't for him. The money was to, ultimately, he built a Zen center in Paris with that money and really tried to help him with his income. So the question I ask you is why money? What will you do with that money? For me, that question is much more important than any technique that we might use. Zen Master Sun San used to ask, well, why do you wake up every day? Why do you eat breakfast every day? And sometimes a student, he would say to a student, I will say to you, why do you wake up every day? How may I help you? Why do you, he would say, some of you may have met this wonderful American teacher, Jane DeBeach. Anybody ever meet Jane? She used to come to Europe a lot 15 years ago. Now she's got a very busy family life and a very busy job, so she doesn't travel at all. She lives in Massachusetts in the United States. But she used to teach a lot in Europe, and when she was a student, before she became a teacher, she went to sit a 3-month retreat in the United States. And Zen Master Sun San was there for the first day of the retreat to give interviews. And she tells the story. She went in to sit down with Zen Master Sun San for an interview, and he looked at her and said, why are you sitting for 3 months in retreat? And she said, well, my mind is kind of crazy and I want to become calm and blah, 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 like that. And he said, no! Then he said, you ask me! That was his style. Young, Korean style. So she said, okay, sir, why are you sitting for 3 months? And he said, for you! So then he actually went away. He didn't sit for 3 months either. He comes back the last day of the retreat to give interviews again after 90 days have passed. And she comes in. This is in her book. She wrote a book about this. She comes in and sits down for her last interview with the retreat with him. And he says, oh, you sat 90 days. That's very wonderful. Why did you sit for 90 days? this is how she describes it. She said, for you, sir. And he goes, wonderful! That's his style. He was teaching her about the correct job of a human being, not for me. So maybe you want to sit a 90-day retreat. Maybe you want to earn some money. Maybe you want a good job. Maybe you want a new phone. It doesn't matter. Why do you do these things? That's what matters. This world has all this new things. This world has great suffering in it. And it's not abstract. It's not off in Afghanistan or in Namibia. It's not in the Philippines. It's actually right here in Vilnius. It's actually right here in this room. This suffering comes from I want and I don't want. And all of us know what that's like. We've all experienced it. Some of you are probably experiencing it right now. I wish you would shut up and get out of this hot room. So if you hold on to I want and I don't want, you create suffering not only for yourselves, but for other people. Our job as human beings is to help this world. To keep this, how can I help you? Mind. To live for you. If you live in that way, then suffering goes down not only for you, but for other people. Not only for other people, but for all beings, for this whole planet. We human beings are very busily destroying this planet. It's not good news. If you read about climate change, it's not good news. We don't have many years left if we continue living the way we're living now. So it's very important that we see our lives clearly and we discover what our true human job is. We all have different kinds of jobs, but each of us has the same inside job, which is to help this world. Please become clear about that job. Find out how to bring that job alive in your own life. Because truly, there is not much time left. It's very important. We have Zen centers only for one reason, and that's to help people practice. We have a Zen center in Kaunas, we have a Zen center here, we have Zen centers in Latvia, we have Zen centers in Poland, in the Czech Republic, in Austria, in Germany, in Russia. There are many Zen centers we have. They all exist for only one reason, to help people practice. Most people will not practice if they cannot have a Zen center close to them. So if you're fortunate enough to live in a community that has a Zen center or any kind of Buddhist temple or practice place, go and practice because it matters. It makes a difference. The bad news of Buddhism, the really bad news is that everything matters. That means you cannot sneak around. That means that everything you do has some consequence, some result. It's also the really good news of Buddhism. Everything you do matters. That means your life, if you choose to lead your life with clarity and compassion and wisdom, and it is a choice that we can make, then it will help this world. So it's very important. Practice is very important. So I don't care personally whether you practice with the Kwan School Center here in Vilnius or in Kaunas, or you practice with the Tibetan group, or you engage in contemplative prayer in Christianity. Please find some practice that works for you in your life situation and be clear clear about why you're doing it.